plate crashed against my forehead with a violence I never imagined my own son could unleash. Shards of white porcelain rained over my dark suit, while the chocolate frosting slid down my creased cheeks. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. 200 guests, family and friends, stared at me with a mixture of horror and second-hand shame. I, Leonard Carter, 70 years old, had just been humiliated by Marcus, my only son, on the most important day of my granddaughter Aaliyah's life. But let me tell you how I got here, to this moment of total rupture. It all began 3 months earlier, when Marcus showed up at my house, with that smile I knew too well. The smile that only appeared when he needed something from me. It was a Saturday morning, and I was watering the roses in the garden that Ruth, my late wife, had planted 15 years ago. The scent of the flowers mingled with the coffee cooling on the patio table, creating that tranquil atmosphere I valued so much at my age. "Dad, we need to talk," Marcus said without even greeting me. His voice had that serious tone he used when he wanted to sound important in his job as an insurance salesman. Brianna, his wife, stood behind him with her arms crossed, avoiding my gaze like she always did. "Of course, son. Want coffee?" "No, Dad. This is serious." I set the hose aside and invited them to sit in the wrought iron chairs Ruth had chosen for the patio. The morning sun cast long shadows across the red tiles, and I could feel something was about to change forever. "It's about Aaliyah," Marcus continued, adjusting his tie as if he were in a business meeting. "You know she's marrying Devin next month." Of course I knew. My 22-year-old granddaughter had been planning her wedding all year, and I had promised to help with the expenses. It was the least I could do for the one person in this family who still visited me often, who still hugged me with genuine warmth, and who called me Granddad with that sweet voice that reminded me of her grandmother. "Yes, and I'm very excited for her," I replied, trying to keep a positive tone despite the tension I felt growing in the air. Marcus exchanged a glance with Brianna before continuing. "Dad, Aaliyah and Devin need a place to live. You know how hard the housing market is for young folks. Rents are sky high, and buying a house, well, it's almost impossible at their age." "I understand," I said, already sensing where this conversation was headed. "How can I help?" "Well, Dad, you've been living alone in this house since Mom passed. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a huge yard. It's too much space for one person." The chill in his voice cut me like a knife. This house wasn't just a physical space. It was the home where I had raised Marcus, where Ruth had spent her last days, where every corner held decades of memories. The yellow dining room walls still kept the height marks where we measured Marcus when he was little. The kitchen held the cinnamon aroma of the desserts Ruth baked every Sunday. The main bedroom still had her things, because I hadn't had the heart to clear them away. "Marcus, this is my house," I managed to say, feeling my voice crack slightly. "Yes, Dad, but think about it. Aaliyah is your favorite granddaughter. She always has been. This would be the perfect chance to show her how much you love her." Brianna finally spoke with that nasal voice that always irritated me. "Leonard, it's not that we want to push you out, but you could move to a smaller apartment, easier to keep up. It would be better for your age." "Better for my age," I repeated, feeling indignation rise in my chest. "What do you mean by that?" "Well, the stairs, the yard, all this maintenance. It isn't safe for a man your age to live alone in a house this big." Marcus nodded vigorously. "Exactly. And think about it, Dad. If you give the house to Aaliyah, you'd secure her future. This property is easily worth $400,000. It would be the most beautiful wedding gift any granddad could give." I stayed silent, watching the roses sway softly in the morning breeze. Ruth always said roses needed time to bloom, that you couldn't force them. In that moment, I felt as if someone were trying to rip up by the roots everything that had ever blossomed in my life. "No," I said at last, with a voice firmer than I expected. "This is my house, and I'm staying here." Marcus's expression changed instantly. The mask of filial concern faded, revealing something darker beneath. "Dad, don't be selfish. Aaliyah needs you. If Aaliyah needs help, I can help her in other ways. I can contribute to the wedding. I can help with the down payment on an apartment, but I'm not giving away my house." "Giving away?" Marcus's voice jumped an octave. Is that what you think? That your granddaughter doesn't deserve your house? It's not about deserving, Marcus. It's that this is my home, my place, and I'm not ready to leave it. Brianna stood abruptly. Leonard, I don't think you understand the situation. This house is too big for you. Sooner or later you'll need care, and it'll be easier for everyone if you're already in a smaller place. Care. The word tasted bitter. Who says I need care? Dad, you're 70. Marcus said with exaggerated patience that felt condescending. It's only a matter of time. Something broke inside me then. It wasn't just the pressure about the house. It was the way they talked to me, as if I had already lost my ability to decide, as if my life no longer belonged to me. It was the way Marcus looked at my home, as if it were property ready to be redistributed for his convenience. I want you to leave, I said, standing with all the dignity I could gather. Dad, don't be dramatic. We're only trying to help. Help, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping. Help whom, Marcus? Aaliyah or you? What's that supposed to mean? It means this conversation is over. I'll support Aaliyah at her wedding, but not in the way you want. Marcus and Brianna left that day without saying goodbye, leaving me alone on my patio with cold coffee and the terrible feeling that this was far from over. The days following that conversation passed with a deceptive calm. I knew Marcus wouldn't give up so easily, but I didn't expect his next move to be bringing Aaliyah directly to my house. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I heard her familiar voice calling from the front door. Granddad, you there? My heart lifted at the sound, as it always did. Aaliyah had that unique ability to brighten any space with her presence. When I opened the door, there she stood with her radiant smile, her green eyes shining with that blend of innocence and determination she'd inherited from her grandmother Ruth. Aaliyah, my beautiful girl, I said, hugging her tight. How are the wedding preparations? Good, Granddad, but that's why I came. I need to tell you something important. I invited her in, and we sat in the living room where we had played chess so many times when she was small. The board still lay on the coffee table with the pieces arranged as if waiting for another match. The lace curtains Ruth had sewn filtered the late afternoon light, casting golden patterns over the blue velvet sofa. Granddad, Dad told me about your talk the other day. Aaliyah began, and I immediately noticed something different in her behavior. She avoided my eyes, played nervously with her hands, and her voice carried a rehearsed tone I had never heard from her. Oh yes, and what exactly did he tell you? That he asked if you could help us with housing, and that you said no. Aaliyah, my love, what your father asked for wasn't help. He asked me to give you my house. She looked up, and for a moment I saw a genuine flash of surprise in her eyes. He asked you to give me the house. Yes, my girl. He said that since this house is too big for me, I should give it to you as a wedding gift. Aaliyah went quiet for a moment, processing. Then, as if she'd remembered a script, her expression changed again. Well, Granddad, maybe it isn't such a bad idea. I mean, Devin and I really do need a place to live, and you'd be more comfortable in a smaller apartment. I looked at her carefully. Do you really believe that, Aaliyah? Yes, Granddad. And we could be closer. We could take better care of you. Take care of me. I finished the thought for her. Because I'm 70, I must be too old to know what's best for myself. No, Granddad, that's not what I meant. It's just this house carries so many sad memories. Maybe it would be good for you to start fresh somewhere else. Sad memories? My voice rose without my permission. Aaliyah, you were born in this house. Right here your grandmother taught you to walk. We celebrated your birthdays here. I know, Granddad, I know. But Grandma isn't here anymore, and you're alone. Wouldn't it be better to be somewhere you don't feel so melancholic? That was when I knew the words coming from my granddaughter's mouth weren't her own. They were too calculated, too much like Marcus's lines. Someone had prepared her for this conversation, handed her the arguments to deliver. Aaliyah, who told you to come talk to me? No one, Granddad. I wanted to come. And who told you exactly what to say to me? No one told me anything. These are my own ideas. But I knew my granddaughter. I had spent too many afternoons with her, playing chess, talking, teaching her the lessons I'd learned in 70 years. I knew her gestures, her expressions, how her thoughts took shape. And this wasn't her. My girl, I said softly, taking her hands in mine. Tell me the truth. Your father asked you to come. For a moment, the mask cracked. I saw the real Aaliyah, the child she had been, the young woman she still was beneath the manipulation. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a second I thought she would tell me everything. Then, as if remembering a cue, she straightened. Granddad, I just want you to be happy. I think you'd be happier in a nice apartment, without so many responsibilities. And you'd be happier in my house. Yes, she answered, but the words sounded hollow, as if she didn't quite believe it herself. Aaliyah, let me ask you something. Do you truly want to live in your grandfather's house, in the place where your grandmother died? Or is this your father's idea? It's my idea, she said, but her voice cracked at the end. My love, you and I have always told each other the truth. Since you were little, you never lied to me. Don't start now. The tears she had been holding back finally slid down her cheeks. Granddad, I don't want to hurt you, but Dad says if you give me the house, we can help you better when you need it. He says it's best for everyone. And what do you think, Aaliyah? Not what your father thinks. Not what your mother thinks. What do you think? I don't know, Granddad. Everything's so confusing. Dad says you're being selfish, but I don't think you're selfish. He says at your age you should be thinking about the family's future, not clinging to material things. Material things. The phrase landed like a punch. Aaliyah, this house isn't a thing to me. It's my home. It's where I built a life with your grandmother. It's where you grew up. I know, Granddad. I know. But Dad says the memories are in the heart, not in the walls. Your dad says a lot. But tell me, what does your heart say? Aaliyah fell silent for a long moment. I could see a small battle waging in her eyes. Finally, she spoke in a voice so small I barely heard it. My heart says I don't want you to be alone. And Dad says if you lived in an apartment near us, we could visit more often. And have you thought that maybe I don't want more visits if the price is losing my home? Granddad, don't say that. It's the truth, Aaliyah. If y'all love me, you'll love me here in my home. If you don't want me here, you won't want me in an apartment either. That's not true. I stood and walked to the window that looked out at the yard. Tell me, my girl, when was the last time your father came to see me just to spend time with me? When was the last time he came without asking for anything? She didn't answer because we both knew. Marcus showed up when he needed money, when he wanted me to babysit the younger kids, or when he had a favor to ask. Granddad, please, just think about it. You could be someplace more comfortable, safer, and we could have a home to start our life together. And if I don't want to think about it, if my answer is no, then I guess we'll have to find another solution. What kind of solution? I don't know, Granddad, but Dad says a family has to support each other. He says when someone won't help, sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. Difficult decisions. I let the word sit. What does that mean, Aaliyah? I don't know, she repeated, but there was something in her voice that made me think she did know, that she had heard more than she was willing to admit. Aaliyah left that afternoon, leaving me with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear, the pressure wasn't just coming from Marcus. There was a larger plan in motion, and my granddaughter was only a piece on the board. That night, sitting in my favorite chair, staring at the family photographs lining the mantel, I made a decision. I wasn't going to hand them my house, but I also wasn't going to sit on my hands waiting to see which difficult decisions they had planned. It was time for Leonard Carter to remember how to defend himself. The transformation of my house began subtly, almost imperceptibly. At first I thought they were coincidences, little changes with innocent explanations. But when I began connecting the dots, I realized I was the target of a calculated strategy meant to make me feel like a stranger in my own home. It started a week after Aaliyah's visit. Marcus showed up on a Saturday morning with a smile that didn't reach his eyes and a key in his hand. Dad, Brianna and I have been thinking. It would be better if we had a copy of your key. You know, in case something happens and you can't answer. What kind of something? I asked, immediate alarm prickling my neck. Well, at your age, anything can happen. A fall, a health issue, any emergency. It'd be irresponsible not to have access. Marcus, I'm 70, not 90. I'm perfectly healthy. Yes, Dad, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Plus, if you decide to move to an apartment soon, someone will have to help with the transition. I already told you I'm not moving. Okay. But as your family, we should have a key. It's normal. Against my better judgment, I handed him a copy. It was the first mistake in a series that would cost me my peace of mind over the following weeks. The changes began the very next day. I came home from my morning walk to find the living room furniture moved. The sofa sat at a new angle, the coffee table shifted, and the floor lamp Ruth had found at a junk shop and restored with her own hands was no longer in its usual place. What happened here? I murmured, genuinely confused. I called Marcus immediately. Son, were you in my house today? Yeah, Dad. Brianna and I came by to tidy up a little. We noticed the place was a bit neglected. Neglected? I clean my house every day. Dad, it's not a criticism. It's just at your age, sometimes you miss things. There was dust in places you probably can't reach, and we thought it'd be good to reorganize things. Make it easier for you to keep clean. Reorganize? Who asked you to reorganize my things? No one, Dad. We're just trying to help. That word, help, was starting to curdle in my stomach. In the future, I said, ask before you come into my home. Of course, Dad. We didn't think it would bother you. But the visits continued. Every few days I found evidence someone had been inside. A book I'd left on the table appeared on the shelf. Curtains I'd closed were open. Dishes were arranged differently in the kitchen. When I confronted Marcus, he always had a reasonable explanation. Dad, we just stopped by to make sure you were okay. Since you don't always pick up the phone right away, we get worried. I answer when I can, Marcus. Sometimes I'm in the yard. Sometimes I'm in the shower. That doesn't mean you need to check if I'm still breathing. Dad, don't be dramatic. We just care. Care soon became something far more invasive. One afternoon, I returned from buying groceries to find Brianna in my kitchen rearranging my cabinets. Hi, Leonard, she said without a hint of embarrassment at being caught inside without permission. I was hoping you'd get back. We need to talk about your diet. My diet? Yes. I check your fridge and pantry, and there are lots of things that aren't healthy for a man your age. Too much salt, too much fat, processed products. Brianna, I've been eating like this for 70 years, and I'm fine. But at your age, you need to be more careful. I brought some better options. That was when I noticed the grocery bags on the counter. My regular coffee had been tossed and replaced with some decaf substitute. My butter had been swapped for light margarine. My white bread replaced by a kind of whole grain loaf that tasted like cardboard. Brianna, I appreciate the concern, but I don't need you to change my food. Leonard, I know change is hard, but it's for your own good. And if you're going to move into an apartment soon, you should get used to a simpler diet. Who said I'm moving into an apartment soon? Well, it's inevitable, isn't it? Sooner or later, you'll need an easier place to maintain. Each day the pressure intensified. Marcus started showing up unannounced, always with some excuse. Just passing by the area and wanted to see how you were. Had to pick something up for work nearby. Brianna got worried when you didn't answer this morning. What bothered me most was how they had begun to speak about my house, as if it already belonged to them. When Aaliyah moves in, we can put up a new fence in the yard. This bathroom will need updates, but we can do it after you move. The kitchen's a bit outdated, but Aaliyah has great ideas to modernize it. One day I found Marcus in the attic going through boxes of memories Ruth and I had saved over the years. What are you doing up here? I asked, feeling a deep violation. Dad, there's a lot of junk up here. When you move, you won't be able to take all this. I thought I'd start sorting what's worth keeping from what we can toss. Junk. My voice faltered. I opened a box he'd been rifling through. Letters Ruth wrote me when we were courting. Photos from our trips. Small souvenirs from special moments. This is what you call junk. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean junk. I just mean there's a lot you haven't looked at in years. That makes it less practical. Less practical for an apartment I'm not moving into. Dad, please, be realistic. You can't live here forever. Why not? Marcus stopped, as if he were about to say something he shouldn't. Because it isn't practical. That night, after he left, I sat in my favorite chair and looked around. My home, the refuge of decades, felt increasingly like a prison. Every day brought new changes, new instructions, new improvements nobody had requested. Worse was the way Marcus spoke about the objects that had defined my life as obstacles to be cleared. The lamp Ruth restored, the tea set from our honeymoon, the family photos documenting decades of love and growth. Everything I had built and valued was being systematically downgraded and prepped for disposal. And I was being treated like an obstacle too. Managed gently but firmly until I finally gave in. For the first time in months, I cried. Not for Ruth, though I missed her terribly, but for myself. For the dignity I felt slipping day by day. For the sense that my own family saw me not as a person to love, but a problem to solve. I stared at the photographs on the mantle, especially one of Ruth and me dancing at Marcus's wedding. We looked so young, so full of hope. I never imagined that the boy smiling in that picture would one day try to push me out of the home we built together. Ruth, I whispered into the emptiness. What am I supposed to do? But silence was my only answer, and for the first time since she passed, that silence didn't comfort me. It terrified me. The truth came to me in the most unexpected way, through the person I least expected. It was a Thursday afternoon when Devin, Aaliyah's fiancé, appeared at my door with an expression I'd never seen on his face. Normally he was cheerful, polite, easygoing. But that day he looked burdened, haunted almost. "Mr. Carter, can we talk?" he asked, glancing nervously over his shoulder as if afraid someone had followed him. "Of course, son," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." I led him to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee. I noticed his hands trembling slightly as he took the mug. He couldn't meet my eyes, and it reminded me painfully of how Aaliyah had looked during her last visit. "Mr. Carter, I don't know how to say this." "Then say it plain," I said gently. "At my age, I've heard just about everything." He took a sip, then exhaled shakily. "It's about the house, about what Marcus and Brianna are planning." My stomach clenched. "What are they planning?" "I shouldn't even be here," he said, voice low. "If Marcus finds out I told you this, he'll try to ruin things between me and Aaliyah. But I can't stay quiet while they do what they're doing. Devin, whatever it is, I need to know." He nodded, took a deep breath, and spoke quickly, like he needed to get the words out before courage failed him. "Mr. Carter, Marcus doesn't just want you to give the house to Aaliyah. He and Brianna have been talking about putting you in a nursing home after the wedding." The words hit me like a hammer. "What?" "I heard them when they thought I wasn't home," he said. "Marcus told Brianna that once they had the house, the next step would be to convince everyone you couldn't take care of yourself anymore, that it would be better for you to live somewhere with professional supervision." My voice sounded distant, almost hollow. "A nursing home?" "Yes, sir, and not a private one. Marcus said that after you gave away the house, you wouldn't have enough left to afford something expensive. It would have to be a public facility." The world began to spin around me. Suddenly everything made sense. The constant visits, the moved furniture, the talk about my safety, my age, and my well-being. They weren't preparing the house for Aaliyah. They were preparing my exit. "Does Aaliyah know about this?" I asked. "No, sir. At least, not the full truth. Marcus told her it'd be better for you to live somewhere safe, but he didn't tell her he plans to have you committed against your will." I studied him for a moment. "And what do you think about all this, Devin?" "I think it's wrong, Mr. Carter. Completely wrong. You're perfectly fine. You don't need anyone making decisions for you. This is your home. Nobody has the right to take that from you." "Then why is Aaliyah going along with it?" He sighed. "Because Marcus convinced her it's for your own good. He scared her into believing that living alone at your age is dangerous, that if anything ever happened to you, it'd be her fault for not insisting you move. And the house. He told her it would secure our future, that it would let us be closer to you. He never told her he plans to have you placed in a facility once it's all done. I narrowed my eyes. How do you know all this? Because I've been listening, he admitted. At first I thought it was just talk, but lately it's clear. After the wedding, once Aaliyah has the deed, Marcus plans to start pushing you toward an apartment. And once you're out, he'll stage situations to prove you can't live alone. What kind of situations? I'm not sure about the details, but I've heard him mention calling social services, reporting incidents that make it look like you're a danger to yourself. Fake incidents. That's what I think. He's talked about things like memory lapses, confusion, small accidents, stuff that could be twisted into evidence you need professional care. I sat in silence for a long time, the truth settling over me like heavy ash. Every piece fit. The keys, the constant visits, the talk about my health. They weren't helping me. They were building a case. Why are you telling me this, Devin? I finally asked. Because it's wrong. Because I can't start my marriage based on a lie. I don't want to live in a house taken from you this way. Have you told Aaliyah? I tried, but she's convinced this is best for you. She really believes Marcus is being a good son by worrying about you. When is all this supposed to start? After the wedding, he said. Marcus wants to wait until things calm down, until you're relaxed, happy that Aaliyah's settled. Then he'll start the pressure for you to move. If you refuse, he'll call social services. He's already researching how to file for legal guardianship. Guardianship. The word hit like a death sentence. Yes, sir. If he convinces a judge that you're not capable of taking care of yourself, he can get legal control of your decisions, where you live, how your money's spent, even your medical choices. And the house. By then, the house would already be in Aaliyah's name. There'd be nothing left to sell. The whole plan unfolded in my mind, cruel in its precision. They didn't just want my home. They wanted my freedom, my dignity, my right to decide for myself. They wanted to reduce me to a legal inconvenience, a financial burden to be managed. I looked at Devin squarely in the eyes. Do you think I belong in a nursing home? No, sir. Absolutely not. You're sharper and more capable than a lot of people half your age. And do you think Aaliyah really wants to live in the house where her grandmother died? He shook his head. Honestly, no. She'd rather start somewhere new. But Marcus convinced her this is the only way we can afford a place. What if there was another way? Devin frowned. What do you mean? What if I could help you both get your own home without giving you mine? That would be incredible, Mr. Carter. But Marcus says the prices are too high. We'd never qualify for a loan. Let me worry about that, I said. But I need a favor in return. Anything, sir. I need you to act as if this conversation never happened. Keep behaving normally around Marcus and Brianna. Don't tell them you warned me. Why? Because I need time to plan my response. I need them to think their scheme is working. He nodded, nervous but resolute. What are you going to do? I'm going to do what I should have done from the start, I said, feeling a surge of resolve I hadn't felt in months. I'm going to fight. Devin left that afternoon with a promise to keep our secret. I stayed alone in the kitchen, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel lonely. I felt focused, ready. Marcus and Brianna had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated Leonard Carter. They thought 70 meant weak, confused, out of options. They were about to find out how wrong they were. That night, I took out a notebook and began writing plans. If they wanted a war, they'd get one, but on my terms, not theirs. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called Harold Mitchell, my lawyer and friend of decades. Harold and I had known each other since we were young men working construction, and over the years he'd handled all my important business, the purchase of my house, my will, Ruth's medical papers when she was ill. Leonard, good to hear your voice, Harold said warmly. How have you been since Ruth's passing? Surviving, Harold, but I need your help with something urgent. Of course. What's going on? I'd rather not talk over the phone. Can we meet somewhere private? Not your office. He heard the seriousness in my tone immediately. Absolutely. How about the cafe at the Oakwood Hotel? Quiet place, no interruptions. Perfect. 2 o'clock. I'll be there. I arrived 15 minutes early. The hotel cafe was elegant but discreet, full of corners where serious conversations could stay unheard. Harold came right on time, carrying his worn leather briefcase and wearing that worried fatherly expression he'd perfected over 40 years of practice. "Leonard, you look tense. What's happening?" I told him everything, from Marcus's first visit asking for the house, to the constant intrusions, to Devon's confession about the nursing home. Harold listened in silence, taking notes in a small pad. When I finished, he leaned back and let out a long whistle. "Leonard, this is serious, very serious." "I know. That's why I need your help." "First things first," he said. "Have you signed any documents recently? Power of attorney? Changes to your will, anything?" "No, nothing." "Good. Does Marcus have access to your bank accounts?" "No, but he does have a key to the house." "Then we changed the locks today, and I want you to open a new account at a different bank, one he knows nothing about." "Why?" "Because if he tries for guardianship, the first thing they'll do is look into your finances. You need funds that can't be easily traced." "You really think he'd go that far?" "Based on what you've told me, yes. Guardianship is a real risk once someone starts hinting that you can't manage your affairs." "What kind of evidence would he need?" "Medical reports, documented incidents, testimony from family members claiming you're forgetful or unsafe. It's easier than people think, especially if the elder doesn't have legal representation." "So what do you suggest?" Harold smiled faintly, the first smile since we sat down. "I suggest we give them a taste of their own medicine." "What do you mean?" "I mean we'll document everything they do. Every manipulation, every unauthorized entry. We'll build a legal record that's stronger than anything they could fabricate. If this ever goes to court, we'll make sure you're standing on higher ground than they are." As he spoke, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time, I wasn't reacting, I was planning. Harold's plan felt like a lifeline. Over the next hour, he outlined a precise strategy. Install discrete security cameras, record every conversation with Marcus and Brianna, obtain up-to-date medical and psychological evaluations affirming my competence, and create a paper trail proving any unauthorized entries or manipulative behavior. "We'll make it airtight," Harold said. "If they try to claim you can't manage, we'll have documentation showing exactly the opposite and evidence of their scheme." After the meeting, I returned home determined. Harold had already arranged for a technician to come the following Saturday to install small, almost invisible cameras in the living room, the kitchen, and my study. The idea of hidden cameras felt intrusive at first, but the intrusion would be theirs, not mine. I wanted to catch every unauthorized visit, every offhand remark meant to unsettle me. If they were building a case, I would gather the contrary evidence and lay it bare. The technician installed the cameras with quiet efficiency and showed me how to access the footage from my phone. The recordings would be stored securely in the cloud. Monday, I visited Dr. Ramirez and asked for a full checkup, saying I needed recent documentation for family matters. He ran tests, checked my reflexes and memory, and within days provided a formal report stating my cognitive and physical functions were within normal ranges. Harold recommended Dr. Santos for a psychological assessment. She tested me over 2 sessions and confirmed my judgment and memory were sound. "We'll document this thoroughly," she said. "This will be important if anyone questions your competence." Meanwhile, the cameras began to collect evidence. Within a week, I had footage of Marcus and Brianna entering unannounced, moving furniture, and discussing safety concerns with a rehearsed tone. In one clip, Marcus criticized how I stored medication. In another, Brianna swapped my coffee. Watching myself on those screens was surreal. Their words played like scripts written to make me seem helpless. Harold listened to the recordings and said, "This is manipulation, potentially elder abuse." He advised patience. "Let them think they're winning," he said. "We need more evidence, and the timing must be right. Ideally, after the wedding, when their guard is down. For now, document everything and stay calm." So I practiced calm. I smiled during phone calls and acted mildly confused at moments when it helped the long plan. I opened a new bank account as Harold suggested. I kept a journal of dates, conversations, and trespasses, The key Marcus had asked for. The day Brianna replaced my butter. The afternoon she rearranged the cabinets without asking. Writing turned my fear into facts. Marcus, oblivious to the cameras, kept pushing. He found an apartment complex that catered to older people and insisted I visit. The model unit looked efficient and safe. Small kitchen, communal dining room, staff on call. The residents moved with a careful cadence, their lives organized by schedules that looked less like freedom and more like containment. "It's perfect," Marcus said, seeing my face. "You'd be safe and have company. We'd visit." I played along. "It looks very secure," I said. In truth, the place felt designed to separate people from independence, to make families comfortable by taking responsibility for a life once entrusted to elders. Back home, Harold and I reviewed new footage. One recording showed Marcus telling a neighbor he'd found a better place for me. Another captured Brianna discussing making things easier by getting me closer to family. We compiled the files, medical reports, and sworn statements from neighbors who had noticed unusual activity. We also started to record conversations with Marcus and Brianna, discreetly capturing every suggestion and push. In one recorded exchange, Marcus worked to manufacture doubt about my memory, citing a non-existent stove incident as evidence. He described micro-events as proof of decline. Harold labeled these moments evidence of fabrication. I filed the physical paperwork Harold recommended, notarized copies of medical reports, an inventory of meaningful items in the home, and a legal safekeep folder with copies of my will and other documents stored elsewhere. We archived the surveillance footage with timestamps and transcripts. Each edition felt like building a shelter out of paper and recordings, but shelters withstand storms. Days before the wedding, Marcus grew bolder. He presented a folder of papers at dinner with the family, documents ostensibly intended to simplify things during the celebrations, forms about power of attorney, suggested living arrangements, lines about planning ahead. He urged me to sign. I asked to take the documents home and read them. He seemed annoyed but didn't press. That was fortunate. Signing would have undone months of careful preparation. To maintain appearances, I agreed to visit the apartment again. Marcus beamed as if victory approached. I asked polite questions about costs and long-term care plans and left with nothing signed. Inside, Harold and I compared notes. "Let them think the wedding will seal it," he said. "We'll let them proceed until we have the moment to strike." The tension was a tight wire. I walked daily. I cooked my own meals so Brianna couldn't change them. I kept my keys in my pocket and watched the staff enter and leave. At times I felt foolish, like a spy in my own home, but each small act of vigilance bolstered me. Neighbors began to comment. Mrs. Alvarez from next door told Harold she'd seen Marcus leaving my house late at night with a box of my things. Another neighbor reported overhearing Brianna tell a friend that I was a little forgetful and that moving me would be for the best. Their sworn statements added weight to our dossier. Harold kept reminding me of restraint. "We have to manage perceptions," he said. "If you appear hostile or paranoid, it undermines everything. Be composed. Let us collect the proof." When I lay awake at night, I reviewed the plan in my head. Cameras in place, medical and psychological reports on file, bank accounts secured, journal meticulous, recordings cataloged, neighbor affidavits collected. We were building an evidence fortress, not an act of revenge, but a defense of dignity. The wedding day loomed. I could feel the moment approaching when truth would meet performance. Harold and I would wait until they made their final move, when Marcus tried to formalize the transfer or apply for guardianship, and then we would show the world the recordings, the reports, and the clear proof of manipulation. Until that day, I walked my rooms like a man practicing for the last act. I tended the roses Ruth had planted and sharpened my resolve steadily. The morning of the wedding arrived draped in golden sunlight, the kind that should have promised joy. But beneath that warmth, I felt only the slow tightening of dread. I'd polished my shoes, pressed my suit, and laid out Ruth's old sapphire cufflinks, the ones she'd given me on our 30th anniversary. They were the only thing that still made me feel anchored, a relic of a time when family meant something untainted. The ceremony was held at the country club on the edge of town, a place that smelled faintly of money and polished wood. Aaliyah looked radiant, as any bride should. Her white gown simple yet elegant. Her smile the same blend of nerves and hope Ruth had worn the day we married. For a brief moment, as she walked down the aisle, I forgot the deception simmering beneath the surface. I saw only my granddaughter, the girl who used to curl up on my lap and beg for stories about her grandmother. Marcus stood at the end of the aisle beside Brianna, his hand resting proudly on Aaliyah's shoulder, as though he had single-handedly built her happiness. When his eyes met mine, he smiled, too wide, too practiced. A smile of conquest, not affection. During the ceremony, my thoughts wandered. I remembered Ruth's words the day we bought our house. "This place will outlive us both, Leonard. Promise me you'll protect it." I had. For 50 years I had. But now, it wasn't thieves or strangers trying to take it. It was family. That made it worse. After the vows and applause, the celebration began. The hall glittered with champagne glasses and laughter, the air thick with the scent of roses and expensive perfume. I stood near the bar, watching Aaliyah and Devin dance. Despite everything, they looked happy, truly happy. I wanted to believe there was still a chance to save her from Marcus's web. "Dad," Marcus's voice broke my thoughts. He approached, his tie loosened, his cheeks flushed with alcohol and pride. "You made it. You look great." I forced a smile. "Wouldn't miss it." He clapped me on the back. "Glad to hear it. Listen, there's something we need to finalize tonight. Small paperwork detail." "Paperwork?" I said, already knowing what was coming. "Yeah, just a little property transfer note. Nothing binding yet. We just want to make sure everything's in place before Aaliyah and Devin leave for their honeymoon. It'll take 2 minutes." My chest tightened. "Marcus, this is your daughter's wedding day. Can't it wait?" He leaned in, his voice lowering to a tone he thought was persuasive. "Dad, this is the perfect time. Everyone's here. Everything's positive. It'll mean so much to Aaliyah." I studied him carefully. The confidence in his eyes wasn't just arrogance, it was expectation. He knew I would resist, and he was ready for that. "I'll think about it," I said evenly. "We'll talk after the toast." He frowned but nodded. "Sure, Dad. Don't take too long." He walked off to join Brianna, who whispered something in his ear while eyeing me with that smug satisfaction that made my stomach turn. An hour later, the microphone crackled as Marcus took the stage. He tapped the glass with a fork, the universal signal for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice amplified and syrupy. "Before we begin our final toast, I want to take a moment to thank someone very special." My instincts flared. I could feel the trap unfolding before he spoke the next words. "My father, Leonard Carter." The crowd turned toward me. I managed a polite smile as applause erupted. Marcus continued. "Most of you know my dad as the kind, generous man who built the very home where I grew up. A man who taught me the value of family, of sacrifice. And today, he's shown once again what true love looks like." My heart dropped. The cameras Harold had set up at home flashed through my mind, the insurance policy against moments like this. But even so, my pulse raced. "I'm proud to announce," Marcus said, grinning wide, "that my father has decided to gift his home to Aaliyah and Devin as their wedding present." The applause was instant and thunderous. People rose to their feet, cheering. Glasses clinked. Aaliyah covered her mouth in shock, eyes wide. Devin froze beside her, horrified. And me? I stood rooted to the floor. The air sucked from my lungs. The words echoed in my head, louder than the crowd. "Gift is home. Gift is home." Marcus walked over and threw his arm around my shoulder, squeezing tightly. "Come on, Dad, say a few words." Every camera phone in the room turned toward us. For a moment, I saw flashes of Ruth's roses, of nights spent on the porch, of every quiet Sunday morning when the world still made sense. Then I looked at Marcus, smug, certain, and something inside me hardened. I stepped toward the microphone. The room hushed. "Thank you, everyone," I began. My voice sounded steady, though my hands trembled. "This has been a beautiful day, one I'll remember for the rest of my life." Marcus beamed beside me. Brianna watched from her seat, already planning what furniture she'd put where. But, I continued, letting the pause stretch until the murmurs began, there seems to be some confusion. Marcus's smile faltered. Dad, I haven't given anyone my house, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Not yet, not ever. The hall fell silent, except for the faint buzz of the microphone. Marcus tried to laugh it off. Come on, Dad, you don't have to be modest. I'm not being modest, I interrupted sharply. I'm being truthful. My house belongs to me, and it will stay that way. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Brianna's smile vanished. Aaliyah looked stricken, glancing between her father and me. Devin lowered his gaze, guilt written all over his face. Marcus's face reddened. He took the microphone from me and forced a laugh. He's just joking, folks. That's his sense of humor. Old Leonard always keeping us guessing. I reached for the mic again. No joke, Marcus. You lied to everyone here. The crowd gasped. Somewhere, a champagne glass shattered on the floor. Marcus turned toward me, his voice low but venomous. Dad, don't do this. I'm only saying the truth. You've been trying to take my home for months. You manipulated Aaliyah. You pressured me. And now you're using her wedding to humiliate me publicly. You're confused, he snapped. You don't know what you're saying. That word, confused, set me off. I know exactly what I'm saying, I thundered. I may be 70, but my mind is clear. You wanted the house, so you could control me. You and Brianna plotted to push me into a home, to take everything Ruth and I built. The hall was dead silent now, every face frozen. Brianna stood, trying to interject, but I didn't give her the chance. I have proof, I said. Recordings, documents, medical evaluations, everything. Marcus's face drained of color. You recorded. Yes, every visit, every word, every time you entered my house without permission. I turned to the audience. This man and his wife have been trying to declare me incompetent so they could take my home, but they underestimated me. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered my name like I was part of a scandalous story. Aaliyah covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dad, is that true? She asked, turning to Marcus. He froze, cornered. Sweetheart, he's twisting things. Answer her, I demanded. But he didn't. He couldn't. Devin stepped forward and placed a protective arm around Aaliyah. It's true, he said quietly. I warned him, Mr. Carter. I told Marcus to stop. A collective murmur swept the room. Marcus stared at Devin like he'd been stabbed. Enough, Marcus suddenly shouted, his voice cracking. You old fool. You're destroying your granddaughter's wedding. No, I said, straightening my shoulders. I'm saving it from being built on lies. Marcus's face contorted in fury. Before I could react, he grabbed a plate from the table and hurled it. The porcelain shattered against my forehead, chocolate frosting and shards scattering across my suit. Gasps erupted. Aaliyah screamed. And that was the moment everything came crashing down. The silence that followed was deafening. As blood trickled down my temple, I looked straight at my son, the man I had raised, the boy Ruth had once rocked to sleep, and said the words that marked the end of everything between us. You just proved me right. The sound of the plate shattering echoed through the hall, like thunder after lightning. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then came the chaos. Gasps, shouts, chairs scraping against the polished floor. Someone rushed toward me with napkins. Someone else screamed for security. Through it all, Marcus just stood there, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling, frosting smeared on his cuff as if he'd struck the ghost of his own guilt. Aaliyah was the first to reach me. Granddad, you're bleeding, she cried, pressing a napkin to my forehead. Her hands trembled as tears streaked her makeup. Dad, what have you done? Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. His face was pale now, drained of the rage that had fueled the throw. Only Brianna spoke, her voice high-pitched and desperate. He provoked you, Marcus. Everyone saw it, he was shouting. I raised a hand to stop her. Let her talk, I said softly. Blood trickled between my fingers, but my voice was calm, eerily calm. Go on, Brianna. Tell everyone how an old man deserved to be attacked by his son in front of his granddaughter on her wedding day. Her face flushed red, then white. She turned away. Security guards arrived. 2 large men in black suits who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. They guided Marcus aside, while one of the waiters dabbed at my wound. I felt strangely detached, as though watching someone else's life unravel in front of me. "Call the police," Devin said quietly. "He assaulted his father." "No," Aaliyah cried. "Please, not today. Please." Her voice cracked, and something in it made me soften. Despite everything, she was still my granddaughter, still the child who once kissed my cheek and called me her hero. "Don't call the police," I said. "Not yet." Devin looked at me in disbelief. "Mr. Carter, he hit you." "Yes, and that's all the proof we need." I turned toward Marcus, who stood trembling near the stage, his tie askew, his face a mess of shock and fury. "You've done more damage with that plate than you ever could with your schemes," I told him. "Everyone here has seen the truth." But Marcus, always the salesman, always the actor, found his footing fast. "You people don't understand," he shouted to the crowd. "My father's sick. He's been paranoid for months. He's making up lies, recording us, accusing us of theft. He's delusional." Gasps again. The crowd, once united in sympathy, now wavered. Doubt seeped in like smoke. I smiled faintly. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," I said. "I have been recording." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small flash drive Harold had given me. Every conversation, every visit, every manipulation. Marcus froze. Brianna's mouth fell open. "I've already sent copies to my lawyer," I continued, "and he's in touch with the press and the authorities. If anything happens to me, anything at all, those recordings go public." Marcus lunged forward, but 2 security guards intercepted him. The crowd erupted again, and within moments, the manager arrived, red-faced and flustered. "Mr. Carter," he said, turning to me, "do you want us to press charges?" I looked at Marcus. His eyes were wide, wild, the look of a man watching his empire crumble. "No," I said softly. "Not yet. Let him live with what he's done. That's punishment enough for now." But inside, I knew this wasn't over. The plate was only the first crack in a wall that had been building for months. Behind that wall was rot, legal, moral, emotional, and it was about to collapse. Later that evening, after paramedics had cleaned and bandaged my forehead, I sat alone in my car outside the venue, the night pressing heavily against the windshield. The muffled echoes of music still drifted from the hall, faint laughter, clinking glasses, the empty continuation of a celebration that had already died. Harold answered on the first ring. "Leonard, I saw the news online. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said. "A few stitches." But Marcus, he lost control. Threw a plate at me in front of everyone. Harold sighed. "Then it's time." "Yes," I agreed. "It's time." We met the next morning at his office, long before Marcus could try to spin the story. Harold had already begun preparing the case file, footage, transcripts, medical evaluations, witness statements, and now, public evidence of physical assault. "Once we file this," Harold said, "you'll have legal protection. We'll issue a restraining order and preemptively challenge any guardianship attempt. The recordings show he's been trying to manipulate you financially. That's elder abuse under state law." "What about Aaliyah?" I asked quietly. "She's caught in the middle." "She'll know the truth soon enough," Harold said. "But right now, our priority is your safety." He was right. By noon, we'd filed the reports, both civil and criminal. A copy of the evidence went to the police, another to a trusted journalist at the Herald. Harold promised to handle the rest. "You've done the hard part, Leonard," he told me. "Now let the law do its job." But laws move slower than emotions. The fallout began almost instantly. By evening, my phone was buzzing with calls, some from relatives demanding explanations, others offering sympathy. Social media was ablaze with half-truths and rumors. Marcus Carter assaults elderly father at daughter's wedding. Some painted me as a bitter old man who'd sabotaged his granddaughter's happiness. Others hailed me as a hero for standing up to family greed. The truth lay somewhere between, but I didn't care what strangers thought. I cared about the people who once loved me. Aaliyah came the next day. She arrived without warning, standing on my porch like a ghost from a happier time. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her dress wrinkled from a sleepless night. "Granddad," she said softly. I opened the door, but said nothing. She stepped inside hesitantly, glancing at the familiar rooms that had once felt like home. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. "Everything's a mess. Dad's saying you've been manipulating him, recording him, trying to make him look bad." "I recorded the truth," I said simply, "and the truth made him look bad all on its own." She nodded weakly. "I saw some of the videos. Devin showed me. I didn't know, Granddad. I didn't want to believe Dad could do that." I studied her face, the way grief and guilt warred in her eyes. "He used you, Aaliyah. Both of you. But I know your heart. You never meant harm." "I didn't," she said, tears falling freely now. "I just wanted everyone to be happy. I thought giving us the house would make you proud, not hurt you." "I am proud of you," I said gently. "You've always been my brightest light. But happiness built on someone else's loss never lasts." She nodded, covering her face with her hands. "Dad's furious," she said between sobs. "He says you ruined everything, that he's going to fix this no matter what." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," I murmured. Before she left, I gave her a small box. Inside were Ruth's wedding earrings, silver with tiny sapphires that matched my cufflinks. "Your grandmother would want you to have these," I said. "She believed in forgiveness, even when people didn't deserve it." Aaliyah hugged me tightly, crying into my shoulder. "I love you, Granddad." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." When she drove away, I stood in the doorway, feeling both lighter and lonelier than I had in years. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. That night, Harold called again. "The police are opening an investigation," he said. "And Leonard, the Herald is running a story tomorrow. You should be ready for what comes next." "What comes next?" I asked. He hesitated. "Marcus won't take this quietly. Once it's public, he'll either double down or disappear. Either way, be careful." I hung up and stared at the dark windows of my quiet house. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the wind rustled through Ruth's roses. I touched the bandage on my forehead and whispered to the night, "You told me to protect this house, Ruth. I'm keeping that promise, no matter what it costs." The battle had moved beyond family now. It had become something larger, a fight for dignity, for truth, for the right to be heard before time silenced me for good. And I was just getting started. The following morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing endlessly. It was still early, sunlight just beginning to filter through the curtains. My first thought was that something had happened to Aaliyah, but when I finally answered, it wasn't her voice I heard. "Leonard, it's Harold," said my lawyer, his tone brisk but grave. "You'd better sit down." I did. "What is it?" The Herald published the article. Front page. The title reads, "Elderly father exposes son's scheme to steal family home. Confrontation ends in assault at wedding." It's spreading fast. I rubbed my temples. Good. The truth deserves daylight. "Yes," Harold said carefully. "But Marcus has already responded. He's given his own interview to Channel 8 News. He's saying you're mentally unstable, that your paranoia has worsened since your wife's death. He even implied you've been forgetting where you are and making up stories." I laughed softly, not out of amusement but disbelief. "He's really going through with it then?" "He is. But don't worry, we're ready for this. I've already forwarded the medical and psychological evaluations to both the journalist and the police. Still, Leonard, we need to stay ahead. He's trying to create doubt before the investigation catches up." "Then we'll give them facts," I said. "Cold, unshakable facts." By afternoon, the reporters began circling like crows. A white van from Channel 8 parked across the street. I watched from my living room window as they filmed my house, the same house Marcus had tried to take. My neighbors peered from their windows, whispering to each other. I wasn't angry. I was tired, but I'd learned that truth doesn't survive in silence. When they knocked, I opened the door. "Mr. Carter," said a young woman holding a microphone. We'd like your response to your son's claims." "Of course," I said evenly. "Come in." She looked surprised, but followed. Her cameraman hesitated at the door. "You're sure, sir?" "Yes. If my son can twist my life in public, I'll untwist it the same way." We sat in the living room. The camera's red light blinked like a heartbeat as the reporter asked her first question. "Your son, Marcus Carter, told us you've been struggling with memory issues and confusion. He says you're imagining this so-called scheme. What do you say to that?" I smiled faintly. "I say this. I have memory issues like I have wings. None. I can tell you every date that matters. Ruth's birthday, the day Marcus was born, the day my granddaughter took her first steps in that very hallway." She pressed gently. "He says you've been paranoid, recording family members, accusing them without reason." "That part's true," I said. "I did record them, but not out of paranoia, out of proof." I gestured to the small flash drive on the table. "This holds months of evidence. Conversations, entries into my home without consent, plans to declare me incompetent so they could claim guardianship." The reporter blinked, stunned. "You're saying your son planned to have you declared legally incapable?" "Yes, and I have witnesses. My granddaughter's husband, Devin, warned me himself. My lawyer, Harold Mitchell, has filed everything with the authorities. If my son wants to talk about confusion, he can start by explaining why he's the one caught on tape discussing how to ease the transition of my property after I'm gone." There was a long silence as the camera captured every word. The interview aired that same evening. It was measured, factual, and impossible for Marcus to spin. For the first time in weeks, the public conversation shifted in my favor. The footage of Marcus throwing the plate, taken by an attendee's phone, was broadcast on multiple stations. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a paranoid old man. It was about greed, betrayal, and family decay. Harold called again that night. "They've opened an official investigation into Marcus and Brianna," he said. "Financial manipulation, potential elder abuse, and now physical assault. It's serious, Leonard." I closed my eyes. Relief and sorrow mixed inside me like oil and water. "I didn't want it to end this way, Harold. He's my son." "I know," Harold said quietly. "But sometimes love means refusing to let someone destroy themselves, or you, with their lies." Days turned into a blur of visits and statements. Police officers came to take formal testimonies. Neighbors signed affidavits confirming they'd seen Marcus entering the house uninvited. Devin corroborated everything, though it pained him. Even Aaliyah, trembling but resolute, agreed to testify if needed. But Marcus wasn't done fighting. A week after the broadcast, I received a thick envelope in the mail, his handwriting on the front. Inside was a letter written in anger and desperation. "Dad, you've humiliated me in front of everyone. You've destroyed my career, my marriage, my family. Do you even know what it's like to have your father drag your name through the mud at my own daughter's wedding? I only wanted to protect you. You've been slipping for years, and you refuse to admit it. Mom would be ashamed to see you like this, vengeful, paranoid, bitter. But if you keep pushing, I'll have no choice but to prove you unfit in court. You can't stop me forever. Marcus." I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in my evidence folder. His words weren't a threat, they were a confession. Harold agreed. "This letter helps us," he said after reading it. "It shows intent, control, and delusion of moral justification. Keep it." Still, I couldn't help wondering when the boy I'd raised had vanished. I thought of the times I'd stayed up nights fixing his science projects, the countless little sacrifices Ruth and I had made to send him to college. Somewhere along the line, gratitude had curdled into entitlement. That night I dreamed of Ruth again. She stood in the garden, surrounded by her roses, looking at me with that patient smile that always said more than words. "They were your joy, Leonard," she whispered. "But joy doesn't mean surrender. You've done right." When I woke, I found tears on my pillow and the faint scent of roses in the air. 2 weeks later, the police formally charged Marcus with assault and initiated proceedings for attempted financial coercion of a senior citizen. The evidence was overwhelming. Brianna's involvement was under review, though she'd already hired her own lawyer and distanced herself from Marcus in public. The arrest was quiet, but the media wasn't. Cameras followed him as he was escorted into the courthouse, his expression one of disbelief and fury. He looked less like a villain and more like a man who'd been outsmarted by someone he dismissed as weak. I didn't attend the first hearing. Harold did. He said Marcus avoided looking at the bench when the judge mentioned the word elder abuse. Still, I wasn't seeking vengeance. I wanted closure. Harold drafted a statement for me to release publicly. I am not motivated by anger. My goal is simple: to protect what was built with love and sacrifice. Every elder deserves dignity and autonomy, and no family bond should justify manipulation or control. I hope this serves as a warning and a reminder that love without respect is not love at all. The statement went viral. Messages began arriving, letters, emails, handwritten notes, from people who had faced similar betrayals by their own families. Some thanked me for speaking up. Others simply shared their pain. I read every single one. Through all this, Aaliyah and Devin stayed close. They visited often, bringing meals, fixing small things around the house. The guilt in Aaliyah's eyes never faded completely, but love began to heal what deceit had broken. Sometimes we'd sit in the garden, talking about Ruth's roses and the wedding that had ended in disaster but might, one day, be remembered as a beginning. Still, the house felt different now. Safer, yes, but quieter, heavier. The kind of quiet that lingers after a storm, when you know the world has changed and won't ever return to what it was. Harold told me the trial could take months. Be patient, he advised. Justice moves slowly, but it moves. I nodded. I could wait. I'd waited my whole life for peace. I could wait a little longer. But deep down, I sensed Marcus wasn't finished. Pride is the last thing to die, and my son's pride had always been larger than his conscience. The night before the preliminary hearing, I sat on the porch watching the moonlight spill across the garden. Somewhere an owl called, and the roses swayed gently in the breeze. I whispered to the darkness, "Ruth, if you can hear me, help me stay strong. He's our son, but he's also my test." And the wind rustled through the roses, like a mother's soft reply. The morning of the preliminary hearing dawned gray and heavy with rain. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring my coffee long after it had gone cold. The house felt unusually still, as if holding its breath. Outside, Ruth's roses bent under the weight of the drizzle, resilient yet bowed, a reflection of my own spirit. I was not afraid of the hearing itself. Harold had prepared everything meticulously: documentation, videos, letters, even witness statements. What I feared was seeing Marcus again, not the legal consequences, but the confrontation with the man my son had become. At 9 sharp, Harold pulled into the driveway. His punctuality was comforting, a small reminder that not all things in my world had dissolved into chaos. He entered without knocking, umbrella dripping on the mat. "You ready, Leonard?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, reaching for my coat. He studied me quietly for a moment. "You don't have to see him if you don't want to. I can speak on your behalf for this hearing." "No," I said. "I need to see him. If I don't, I'll never stop wondering if there's anything left of the boy I raised." The drive to the courthouse was silent except for the soft patter of rain on the windshield. The town seemed smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing it differently now, through the lens of betrayal. When we arrived, reporters were already gathered outside, umbrellas forming a forest of black domes. Flashbulbs flared as soon as they spotted me. "Mr. Carter, do you have a statement?" one shouted. "Do you forgive your son?" another asked. I said nothing, walking steadily through the crowd. Forgiveness was a word I hadn't decided on yet. Inside, the courthouse smelled of paper and disinfectant. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the halls. Marcus sat at the defense table in a navy suit, his hair slicked back, his face drawn tight. Brianna wasn't with him. She'd filed for separation a week earlier, citing irreconcilable differences. A fitting phrase for the aftermath of greed. When Marcus saw me, he froze. His jaw clenched, and for a fleeting second, I saw something like fear flash in his eyes. Not the fear of punishment, but of recognition, seeing in me the man who had once carried him on his shoulders, the father who believed in him. The judge entered, and the room rose. The proceedings began formally, voices echoing through the chamber. Legal jargon, procedural confirmations, statements of evidence. I sat still, listening, observing. Harold was precise and calm, as always. He presented the video footage, clips of Marcus and Brianna discussing transition plans, moving furniture, and talking about my supposed decline. Then came Devin's testimony. Devin stood at the witness stand, hand shaking slightly, but voice steady. Marcus told me that after the wedding, he planned to pressure Mr. Carter into moving out. He said he'd make it seem like Leonard couldn't live alone safely. He used the phrase better for everyone, but it was clear he wanted the house. Marcus's lawyer objected twice, but the judge overruled him both times. Devin continued, explaining how he'd warned me, how I'd quietly gathered proof. He even described the wedding outburst in the plate, his words slow and deliberate. When it was over, Harold played one final recording, Marcus's voice, unmistakable, saying, "Once he's in the home, we can handle the rest. He won't last long anyway." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge lowered her gaze, as if the cruelty of those words deserved a moment of mourning. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue that the recording was taken out of context, that it represented family frustration, not intent. But no one in the room believed him. When the judge called a recess, Marcus turned toward me, his face pale, eyes burning. "You set me up," he hissed. "You've destroyed your own son." I leaned forward slightly. "No, Marcus. You destroyed yourself. I just showed everyone what you built." He stood abruptly, fists trembling, but his lawyer pulled him back down. For the first time, I saw him as he truly was, not powerful, not cunning, just small, terrified, and broken by his own ambition. During the break, I stepped outside into the courthouse courtyard. The rain had stopped, leaving everything shining under a dull gray light. Aaliyah was waiting by the bench, wrapped in a beige coat, her hair pulled back. She looked older than her 22 years. "Granddad," she said softly. "I couldn't stay home. I needed to be here." I smiled faintly. "You shouldn't have to see this." "I do," she said, "because I helped it happen. I let him convince me." "You didn't let it happen," I told her gently. "You believed in your father. That's not a sin." She shook her head. "He's different now. He doesn't even look like himself." We sat in silence for a while, watching the courthouse fountain ripple in the breeze. Then she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Do you hate him?" I thought about that. Hate was too simple, too blunt a word for what I felt. "No," I said finally. "I don't hate him. I mourn him. Hate ends things. Mourning keeps them alive long enough to remember what they were before." She nodded, understanding. "What will happen to him?" "That's up to the court," I said. "And maybe to him, if he decides to change." Before we went back inside, she took my hand and whispered, "I love you, Granddad. Thank you for not giving up on the truth." Her words warmed something inside me that I'd thought long dead. When the recess ended, the judge returned with her ruling. Given the evidence presented, the court finds sufficient grounds to proceed with formal charges of elder abuse, financial coercion, and assault. Mr. Marcus Carter will remain under supervision pending trial. A restraining order will be issued to protect Mr. Leonard Carter. The gavel struck once, echoing like the end of a long nightmare. Marcus said nothing as the bailiff approached him. His lawyer whispered urgently, but Marcus's eyes stayed fixed on me. There was no rage now, just emptiness. As the courtroom emptied, Harold placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "It's over for now," he said. "You did it." But I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Winning against your own blood doesn't feel like victory. It feels like surviving a fire that burned your home but spared your life. The weeks that followed were quieter, almost eerily so. The reporters moved on to other scandals. The calls from distant relatives stopped. The world seemed to lose interest in the story of an old man who refused to be erased. Aaliyah and Devin visited often, helping me restore the house to what it had been before Marcus's intrusions. We repainted the living room, rehung roof's curtains, and planted new rose bushes in the garden. For every plant that died during the turmoil, we replaced it with 2 more. One afternoon, as we worked in the yard, Aaliyah found a small box half buried near the porch, an old tin I hadn't seen in years. Inside were photographs. Ruth holding a newborn Marcus, me carrying him on my shoulders, all of us laughing in the sunlight. I felt my chest tighten at the sight. "Keep them," I told her. "They're part of your story, too." She nodded, but I saw the tears glimmer in her eyes. "Do you think he'll ever come back to us?" she asked quietly. I looked at the roses swaying gently in the afternoon breeze. "Maybe," I said, "but if he does, I hope it's as a man who's learned that love isn't something you take, it's something you honor." For the first time in months, peace settled over the house. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from forgetting. It was the kind that comes from surviving, from standing in the ruins and realizing you're still there. That night, as the sun set behind the oak trees, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and felt Ruth's presence beside me. The roses glowed faintly in the fading light, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, a reminder that storms pass, but the air they cleanse can feel new again. The war wasn't completely over. The trial still awaited, and so did the reckoning that comes after truth is spoken aloud. But for now, in that brief moment of calm, I allowed myself to breathe, and to hope that somewhere deep inside, Marcus might one day find his way back to being my son. The following months moved slowly, each day thick with that strange mixture of quiet and unease that follows a public storm. Life returned to its ordinary rhythms: coffee at dawn, the smell of wet soil in the garden, the soft rustle of the newspaper on the porch. But under that calm, I could still feel the echo of what had happened. The trial date was set for November. Until then, Marcus was under supervised release, forbidden to contact me directly. Yet even from a distance, I could feel his presence like a shadow stretching across my days. The air would shift when I thought of him, still my son, still flesh of my flesh, but now a stranger I had to protect myself from. Aaliyah and Devin became my anchors. They visited often, sometimes to help with repairs, sometimes just to talk. We'd sit on the porch drinking tea, watching the light fade behind the trees. Aaliyah had changed since the wedding. The girl who once sought to please everyone had been replaced by a woman who spoke with quiet strength. The ordeal had hardened her, but it had also clarified her sense of what mattered. One evening, she brought over a small folder. "It's from Dad's old office," she said hesitantly. "When they cleared it out, the police let me collect personal items. I didn't know if you'd want to see it." I hesitated before taking it. The folder was worn, edges frayed, the label smudged. Inside were bills, insurance policies, and a few old photos. Ruth holding Marcus at his high school graduation, Marcus and me building a treehouse in the yard. But tucked between the papers was something else, a letter sealed, with my name written in Marcus's handwriting. "Did you read it?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I thought you should be the one to open it." After she left, I sat for a long time staring at the envelope. Finally, I tore it open. "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness, and maybe I don't even deserve to explain. But since the world has already judged me, I need to say this somewhere, even if it's just on paper you'll throw away. I didn't start out wanting to hurt you. At first, I really did think it would be best for everyone if you sold the house. You seemed lonely, and the place looked too big for you. But then I saw the numbers, the value, the potential, and something shifted. I told myself it was for Aaliyah, but deep down, it was for me. I wanted control, wanted to prove that I could finally take charge of something you built. I convinced myself it was my turn to lead. The truth is, I've always felt small next to you. You never said it, but I saw it in how you carried yourself, how everyone respected you. I thought getting the house would make me your equal, or at least prove I could be the man you were. Instead, I've lost everything. Brianna's gone. My daughter barely speaks to me. And you. I don't even know if you're still my father. I don't expect you to reply. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what you meant about love and honor. Maybe it's too late to fix what I broke, but for whatever it's worth, I am sorry. Marcus." When I finished reading, I sat in silence, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. The words weren't enough to erase what he'd done, but they carried a truth that I hadn't heard from him in years. Regret, raw, imperfect, human. I placed the letter inside my desk drawer, beneath Ruth's wedding ring and the key to the old attic. Forgiveness would take time, maybe more time than I had left, but I could feel the faint stirrings of it, fragile as a new leaf in winter. As the trial approached, Harold remained diligent. We met twice a week, reviewing evidence, anticipating defenses. He might try to claim diminished responsibility, Harold said one morning. Stress, depression, maybe even temporary breakdown. His lawyers already hinting at it. Would that change anything? I asked. It might lessen the sentence, but not the truth, Harold said. And that's what really matters now. He was right. What I wanted most wasn't punishment, it was acknowledgement. A public admission that what happened to me was wrong. That old age didn't make me disposable. That the bond between father and son, once broken by greed, could at least be seen for what it was. A few days before the trial, Aaliyah came by again. She looked pale, anxious. I saw Dad, she said. I froze. Where? At the counseling center. He's been attending mandatory sessions as part of the supervision terms. I was leaving a workshop nearby and ran into him outside. He looked different, thinner, tired. What did he say? She hesitated. He asked about you. Wanted to know if you're okay. He said he's not fighting the charges anymore. That surprised me. He's not. She shook her head. He told me he'll plead guilty. He said dragging this through court would only make things worse for everyone. I didn't know what to feel. Relief, perhaps, but also a hollow sadness that I couldn't shake. The trial never happened. A week later, Harold called with the official news. Marcus had accepted a plea deal. He would receive 2 years of probation, mandatory therapy, and restrictions on contact until a judge reviewed his progress. There would be no prison sentence, no drawn-out legal battle. It's not perfect justice, Harold said, but it's something, and you'll remain legally protected. I thanked him, though my voice was distant. After we hung up, I walked into the garden, where the late autumn sun cast long, gold-tinged shadows across the grass. The roses had started to fade, their petals browning at the edges, yet they still held a certain stubborn beauty. I thought of Marcus, alone somewhere, probably wondering if he'd ever be welcomed home. For the first time in months, I whispered a prayer for him, not for redemption or reunion, but for peace. The kind of peace that only comes when a man stops lying to himself. Winter came early that year. The cold crept in through the floorboards, and frost painted the edges of the windows each morning. I spent most days reading by the fire or attending to small repairs around the house. The loneliness was sharper in winter, but it didn't ache the way it once had. I had survived worse than silence. One evening, a soft knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, I found a man standing in the snow, head bowed, hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things. It was Marcus. He looked older, 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. His once perfect hair was unkempt, his eyes rimmed with fatigue. He hesitated on the porch, as though afraid the threshold might reject him. "Dad," he said quietly, "I know I'm not supposed to be here. The restraining order's still active, but I needed to see you." I didn't speak. I just watched him, waiting. "I'm not asking for anything," he continued. His voice broke. "I needed to apologize face to face. I'm sorry for everything. For Mom's house. For the wedding. For that day. For the plate." The memory of frosting and porcelain against my skin flashed vividly before me. I touched the faint scar on my forehead. "You hit me," I said quietly. "I know," he whispered, "and I'll regret it every day of my life." We stood there for a long time, the snow falling gently between us. Finally, I stepped aside. "Come in," I said, "just for a moment." He hesitated, then nodded. Inside, the warmth hit us both. He looked around the house, the furniture, the curtains, the photographs on the mantel, and something in his face softened. "It's just like I remember," he said. "It's still home," I replied. He looked at me then, truly looked, and I saw the boy he'd once been flicker for just a second behind the man he'd become. "Dad," he said, voice trembling, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I'm trying to be better." I nodded slowly. Trying is a good place to start. And as he turned to leave, I said the words I hadn't planned but somehow needed to speak. "Marcus," I called softly. He stopped halfway through the door. "I forgive you," I said. "Not because you deserve it, but because I can't carry this anger anymore." He froze, shoulders shaking. Then, without turning around, he whispered, "Thank you." When the door closed behind him, the silence that followed felt different, not heavy, not lonely, just peaceful. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the garden, the roses, and all the scars that once marked this house with pain. For the first time in a long while, I felt ready to let the past rest beneath that quiet white blanket, where even broken things could look whole again. The days after Marcus's visit were strange, quiet, almost reverent. The kind of quiet that follows a storm not because everything is healed, but because there's nothing left to destroy. I found myself thinking about that night more than I cared to admit, his voice trembling on the porch, the snow catching in his hair, the way he said thank you like a man starving for something he'd forgotten existed. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't feel like I expected. It didn't feel noble. It felt like exhaustion, like finally dropping a heavy stone I'd been carrying in my chest for months. But beneath that weariness was something gentler, a kind of reluctant mercy that surprised me. I wasn't absolving him, I was releasing myself. Winter settled deep into the bones of the house. The radiators hissed, and the wind pressed against the windows like an old ghost testing the locks. Aaliyah visited every few days, always bringing warmth with her. She had started volunteering at a community legal center, helping elderly tenants avoid eviction. "It's because of you," she told me one night, sipping tea by the fire. "You made me realize how easily older people can be manipulated. I want to help protect them." I smiled. "Your grandmother would be proud." "I hope so." She hesitated. "Have you heard from Dad?" "No," I said, "and I'm not sure I will for a while." She nodded, eyes downcast. "He's still in therapy. The counselor says he's showing progress. They want to recommend early release from supervision next year." "That's good," I said quietly, "if it's real progress." "It is," she said. "He's sober now. No drinking. He's been working at a local hardware store. Devin saw him there last week." I took that in, unsure what to feel. Pride? Relief? Maybe both, or maybe something harder to name. "If he's rebuilding his life," I said, "I hope he builds it better this time." Spring arrived slow and uncertain, like a guest afraid to knock. The snow receded, revealing damp earth and the first green shoots in Ruth's garden. I spent long hours outdoors pruning the rose bushes, talking to them as Ruth used to. "You made it through another winter," I told them, though I knew I was really speaking to myself. One morning, as I was trimming the dead branches, a car pulled up in the driveway. I straightened, half expecting Marcus again, but it was Harold. He stepped out wearing his usual brown overcoat, holding a folder under his arm. "Morning, Leonard," he called. "You look busy." "Trying to keep the roses alive," I said. "They've been through a lot." "Haven't we all?" He smiled and handed me the folder. "Thought you'd want to see this. The final paperwork from the court. The protective order has been lifted. Case officially closed." I stared at the document, a simple piece of paper that somehow marked the end of an ordeal that had reshaped my life. "Just like that." "Just like that," he said. "You're free to move forward however you want." We went inside, and Harold poured himself a cup of coffee like he always did when he visited. "How are you really doing, Leonard?" "I'm still learning," I said after a moment. "I thought forgiveness would be a door closing. Turns out it's more like a window you have to keep open, even when the air's cold." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's as good a definition as any." I looked at the framed photo of Ruth on the mantel. She'd probably say I took too long to get there. Harold chuckled softly. Ruth always had the right words. Then his tone turned serious. "Have you considered what's next? The house is safe now. You've won. But victory can feel empty if you don't know what to do with it." "I've thought about it," I admitted. "Aaliyah wants me to speak at her center, to share my story with other seniors. She thinks it might help them recognize when someone's trying to take advantage." Harold's eyes lit up. "That's an excellent idea. You could do real good, Leonard. and it would give meaning to everything you've endured. Maybe, I said, but part of me wonders if I should just let it fade. Not every scar needs to be shown. He leaned forward. Maybe not, but some need to be seen so others know where the wounds come from. That night, after Harold left, I sat by the fire and thought about what he'd said. I remembered every moment of the past year. The deceit, the humiliation, the courtroom, the plate. Each memory hurt, but together they formed something solid. A story that might warn someone else before it was too late. By the time the embers burned low, I'd made up my mind. The first time I spoke publicly about what had happened was at a modest community hall filled with retirees and volunteers. Aaliyah stood by the door, handing out pamphlets about elder rights. Devin adjusted the microphone and gave me a reassuring thumbs up. When I stepped onto the small stage, I expected nerves, but instead I felt a calm clarity. These were my people, men and women who'd spent their lives building, working, raising families, only to find the world growing smaller around them as they aged. I told them my story without bitterness, about Marcus and the house, about the manipulation that began as help and turned into control, about how easily love can become leverage when people see vulnerability as opportunity, and finally, about standing my ground, not through anger, but through truth and preparation. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then came the applause, not loud or raucous, but sincere. One woman stood and said, "You reminded me I still have a voice." Another man added, "My son's been pushing me to sell my home. I thought it was just me being stubborn. Maybe I need to take a closer look." I realized then that my story had stopped belonging solely to me. It had become a mirror for others. Aaliyah hugged me afterward, eyes bright. "You were incredible, Granddad. Grandma would have been so proud." "She already knows," I said with a smile. "She's probably up there telling me I finally learned to listen." As months passed, I spoke at other events, senior centers, legal aid workshops, even a local radio program. Each time, I told my story not as a victim, but as a survivor. Harold joked that I'd become a local celebrity, though I never felt like one. I was just a man trying to make something useful out of his pain. Then, one late afternoon in early autumn, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unfamiliar, neater, steadier than before, but the name on the return address made my heart pause. Marcus Carter. Inside was a simple note. "Dad, I've been attending therapy every week. It's hard work, harder than I imagined, but I'm learning things about myself I never wanted to face. The counselor says part of making amends is taking responsibility without expecting anything in return. So this isn't a request for forgiveness. You already gave me that. It's just a thank you for not letting me ruin you completely, for showing me what strength really looks like. Aaliyah tells me you're speaking publicly now. I saw one of your talks online. You looked happy. Keep doing it. Maybe someday I'll be brave enough to sit in the audience. Marcus." I folded the letter and set it beside the first one he'd written. 2 letters, one born of guilt, the other of growth. I thought of how different they sounded. The first had been an apology written from a man drowning. The second came from someone learning to swim. That night, as twilight deepened over the garden, I stood among Ruth's roses, their petals heavy with late autumn dew. I could almost hear her voice in the rustle of the leaves. "You did what you had to, Leonard. And now it's time to live again." So I did. I tended my garden. I wrote letters to friends I hadn't spoken to in years. I started keeping a journal, not of regrets, but of small blessings. Each entry began the same way. Today, I chose peace. And slowly, day by day, peace began to choose me back. But life, as it tends to, had one more test waiting. One crisp October morning, as the first frost glittered on the grass, Harold called. His voice sounded hesitant. "Leonard, I just got some news about Marcus." My chest tightened. "What happened?" "He's been in an accident. Nothing fatal, thank God, but serious. They're transferring him to St. Mary's Hospital. He asked for you." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. My hands trembled around the phone. "He asked for me?" "Yes," Harold said softly. "He said he wants to see his father." I looked out the window at the garden, at the roses bending under the weight of frost, and I felt the old ache stir again. Not of anger this time, but of love, fragile and enduring. "I'll go," I said quietly. "Tell him I'm coming." And for the first time in a long while, I reached for my coat, not to defend what was mine, but to answer the call of what I'd almost lost forever, a son reaching back through the cold. The drive to St. Mary's Hospital was long and quiet, the kind of drive that makes every mile feel like a question. The sky was pale and washed out, the trees along the roadside bare and skeletal. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, not because of the traffic, there was barely any, but because I was holding back 100 emotions at once. Marcus had asked for me. After everything, after the trial and the silence, after the apologies and the years of distance, he had said my name again. That thought alone filled me with equal parts dread and hope. When I reached the hospital, the air was thick with antiseptic and the faint hum of machines. The receptionist led me to the second floor, to a room with half-closed blinds and the soft beeping of a monitor. Marcus lay there, pale but awake, a cast around his right leg and bruises across his arms. His hair was shorter, flecked with gray now, and for the first time in years, I saw not the man who had betrayed me, but the boy Ruth and I had raised, the boy who used to scrape his knees and run crying to my arms. He turned his head slowly when I entered. "Dad." His voice was thin but clear. I stood by the door, unsure whether to step closer. "You look like hell," I said softly. He managed a faint smile. "You should see the other guy. Or, in this case, the tree I hit." I exhaled, part relief, part disbelief. What happened? I swerved to avoid a deer. Guess I wasn't paying enough attention. "You never did," I said, and the words came out sharper than I intended. But then he chuckled weakly, and I found myself smiling too. Silence hung between us for a moment, not the bitter kind we used to share, but tentative, fragile, like a truce made of glass. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "You asked for me." "Yeah," he murmured. "I wasn't sure if I had the right to." I pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. "Marcus, you'll always have the right to call for me. You're my son. That hasn't changed." He closed his eyes briefly, and a single tear escaped. "I don't deserve that." "No," I agreed quietly. "You don't. But that's not the point." He opened his eyes again, studying me. "You really forgive me, don't you?" "I told you I did," I said, "and I meant it." "I thought forgiveness meant everything goes back to normal," he said. "But it doesn't, does it?" I shook my head. "No, forgiveness doesn't rebuild what was broken. It just stops you from bleeding to death on the shards." He absorbed that, staring up at the ceiling. "I've been going to therapy every week," he said after a moment. "They make me talk about everything, about Mom, about you, about the house. I hate it, but I think it's helping. The counselor says guilt isn't the same as growth, and I'm still trying to learn the difference." I leaned back in my chair. "That's a lesson most people never learn." He looked at me again, eyes hollow but alive. "Do you still live alone?" "I do," I said. "Aaliyah and Devin visit often. They help with the garden." "She told me you speak at those events now," he said, "about elder abuse and dignity and all that. I watched one of your talks online." "You did?" "Yeah. You sounded proud, not angry anymore. I didn't think I'd ever hear that in your voice again." I nodded slowly. Anger gets heavy after a while. It's easier to carry peace. He smiled faintly. "I wish I'd learned that sooner." "You're learning it now," I said. "That's enough." For a while we sat in silence, the only sound the rhythmic beeping of the monitor and the occasional murmur from the hallway. Then he said, "Dad, there's something I've been meaning to tell you." I looked at him, waiting. "When Mom got sick," he began, "I didn't visit as often as I should have. I told myself it was because I couldn't handle seeing her that way. But the truth is I was scared. Scared of feeling helpless. Scared of watching her fade. And I think part of what I did later, with the house, was me trying to take control of something, anything, because I couldn't control losing her." I felt my throat tighten. "Marcus, I'm not excusing it," he said quickly. "I'm just trying to understand myself. I used to think I was nothing like you. Now I see I've been running from your shadow all my life. I wanted your strength, but I didn't know how to build it, so I tried to take it from you instead." I didn't respond right away. His honesty disarmed me more than his lies ever had. "Strength," I said finally, "isn't about control, Marcus. It's about standing when you have every reason to fall. Your mother taught me that. You'll learn it too, if you keep standing." He nodded weakly, eyes glistening. "I want to try. That's all I need to hear." The nurse came in then, checking his vitals, smiling politely at me before leaving us alone again. "Dad," Marcus said quietly, "when I get out of here, I'd like to help with the garden, if you'll let me." I hesitated, then smiled. "You'll have to learn the difference between pruning and hacking." "I can learn," he said, and I believed him. Marcus was discharged 2 weeks later. His leg was healing, though he still walked with a cane. I drove him home from the hospital, not to my house, but to a small apartment the rehabilitation program had arranged. It was modest but clean, with a single window overlooking a park. "I'll get back on my feet here," he said as we carried in his bags. "Start fresh." "That's good," I said. "Fresh is a good thing." He looked at me with a shy kind of gratitude. "You know, for a long time I thought losing the house was the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I think it saved me." "Maybe it saved both of us," I said. Before I left, he reached for my hand. His grip was firm, his voice steady. "Thank you for coming that day." "Thank you for calling me," I said. When I got home, I stood in the doorway and breathed in the familiar scent of wood polish and roses from the vase on the table. The house felt different again, not haunted, not heavy, alive. Over the next few months, Marcus and I rebuilt slowly. He came by on weekends, helping me with small repairs, cooking dinners we used to share when Ruth was alive. Aaliyah joined sometimes, laughter slowly returning to the spaces that once echoed with shouting. One afternoon, as we worked side by side fixing the fence, Marcus looked up at the sky and said, "You know, I used to think the word family meant never failing each other. Now I think it means never giving up trying to make things right." I smiled. That's closer to the truth. We stood there in the fading sunlight, the smell of cut grass around us, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like we were on opposite sides of anything. That summer, Aaliyah and Devin announced they were expecting their first child. The news hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. A grandchild, new life, new beginnings. When she told me, I hugged her tighter than I had in years. "You're going to be a great-grandfather," she said, laughing through tears. "And you," I said, "are going to make your grandmother proud." Even Marcus cried when he heard. "I'll do better this time, Dad," he said. "I'll be there for her. For all of you." I believed him. The day they brought the baby home, little Ruth, named after her great-grandmother, I stood in the garden holding her in my arms. Her tiny fingers curled around my thumb, soft and certain. Marcus stood beside me, quiet, watching. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She is," I said. And as I looked at that tiny face, I realized that the story that had begun with a plate thrown in anger had led, somehow, to this, to renewal, to grace. Life had circled back, bruised but unbroken. Ruth's roses bloomed that summer more fiercely than ever before, as if the earth itself had forgiven us all. But life, I knew, still had one more chapter left to write. The years had taught me that peace is never permanent. It's something you tend like a garden, with patience, vigilance, and love. And though the shadows of the past still lingered at the edges, I no longer feared them, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone in the light. It was autumn again, almost a full year since that first terrible wedding day when everything had fallen apart. The air was sharp and clean, the kind that smells faintly of wood smoke and endings. The maples along the road had turned to fire, gold and crimson reflected in every window of the house. I spent the morning in the garden, pruning back the roses for winter. They had grown wildly that year, almost defiant in their color, as if determined to prove that beauty could survive even after betrayal. Marcus was late, as usual, but I didn't mind. I had learned patience, not just the kind that waits, but the kind that accepts. When he finally arrived, I heard his uneven footsteps on the gravel path. He still used a cane, though less for necessity now and more out of habit. He waved when he saw me, a genuine smile lighting his face. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "Aaliyah had me picking up diapers. Little Ruth's got a stomach like a clock, feeds every 3 hours." I chuckled. "Your grandmother would have said that's a sign she'll grow strong." "I hope so," Marcus said, setting down a small basket he'd brought. Inside were tools, gloves, and 2 tiny rose cuttings. "I thought we could plant these together. They're from your favorite bush, the one by the porch. Aaliyah wants to start a garden at her place. Says she wants to bring a bit of Grandma Ruth there." I nodded, touched. "She has her spirit. That girl carries the best of both of you." We knelt side by side, the earth cool beneath our hands. It struck me how different this felt from all the years before. There was no tension, no guarded silence. Just 2 men, father and son, working together in the soil that had seen both their worst and their best. For a while we didn't speak. The only sounds were the scrape of the trowel, the whisper of wind through the trees, the soft murmur of birds returning to the feeders. Then Marcus said quietly, "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about forgiveness." I looked at him. "What about it?" "I used to think it was something you gave once, and that was it. But it's not, is it? It's something you have to keep choosing, every day." I smiled faintly. "Yes, just like love. You don't feel it once and let it sit. It needs tending." He pressed the soil around the roots of the cutting. "I still have bad days," he admitted. "Days where I wake up and hate the man I was. Sometimes I wonder how you could ever look at me again and not see that version of me." "I see him," I said honestly. "But I also see the man sitting in front of me now. And I choose to keep seeing both. That's what makes forgiveness real." He nodded, eyes glistening. "You always make it sound simple." "It's not simple," I said. "It's just necessary." We finished planting the roses and sat on the porch steps, watching the light change. The sky was streaked with the soft orange of early evening. Marcus leaned on his cane and sighed. "Do you ever think about Mom?" he asked. "Every day," I said. "She's everywhere in this house. In the way the windows catch the light, in the smell of the kitchen, in these roses. Sometimes I still talk to her." "What do you say?" I smiled faintly. Usually that she was right about everything. He laughed softly. "Yeah, she usually was." There was comfort in that laugh, the kind that once seemed impossible. After a while, Marcus stood. "I should go. Aaliyah's cooking tonight. She's getting good at it, by the way. And she insists we all come over for Sunday dinner. Devin's making his famous lasagna." "I wouldn't miss it," I said. He hesitated before heading down the path. "You know, Dad, I don't say it enough, but thank you. For everything, for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." I met his gaze. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. When he left, I stayed outside for a while, watching the light fade. The air turned cool, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. The house glowed softly behind me, warm, steady, alive. For years, I had feared dying alone in it. Now, I understood that loneliness wasn't the absence of people. It was the absence of peace. And peace, at last, had come home. Winter came quietly that year, almost respectfully. The first snow fell on a still night, blanketing the world in silence. I woke early, as I always did, and stood at the window with my coffee, watching the light creep over the frost-covered garden. The roses slept beneath their covering of burlap, waiting for spring. Later that morning, Aaliyah arrived with little Ruth bundled in a blanket. Marcus followed, carrying gifts, fresh bread, preserves, and a thermos of soup. They filled the house with laughter and warmth, the kind that seeps into the walls and makes them hum. "Granddad," Aaliyah said, handing me the baby. "She's been trying to say your name. I swear she almost said Len yesterday." I held Ruth close, her tiny hand clutching at my collar. "It's all right if she says Granddad first," I said. "Let's not rush her." Marcus grinned. "She's got your eyes, you know." "Poor girl," I said, and we laughed. When they left that evening, the house felt full even after they were gone. I lit the fire, sat down with my journal, and wrote the same words I had been writing for months. Today, I chose peace. But then I added something new beneath it, and peace chose me back. The years that followed were kind. The story that once tore our family apart slowly became the story that bound us together again. Aaliyah's community center grew, expanding into a foundation that helped hundreds of seniors protect their homes and rights. She often asked me to come speak, though eventually, my knees and age made it harder to travel. Marcus, true to his word, rebuilt himself from the ground up. He became a counselor for men struggling with addiction and family estrangement, using his own scars as lessons. He never spoke publicly about what happened between us, but sometimes I'd hear snippets from others. How he'd help fathers reconcile with sons. How he'd quote something I'd once said about strength, not being control but endurance. And little Ruth grew like the roses, bright, curious, and unstoppable. By the time she turned 7, she could name every flower in the garden. "This one's Grandma Ruth's favorite," she'd say, pointing to the red climbing rose. "And this one's mine." Sometimes I'd catch Marcus watching her from the porch, a look of awe on his face, as though he still couldn't believe he'd been given another chance. Years later, when my time finally began to wane, I wasn't afraid. The doctor had used words like gentle decline, and that seemed fitting. My body was slowing, yes, but my heart was full. On my last autumn morning, I asked Marcus to take me outside to the garden. The air was cool, the sky clear. The roses were in full bloom, defying the season, stubbornly alive. "Look at them," I whispered. "They're showing off again." Marcus smiled through tears. "You did good, Dad." "No," I said softly. "We did good." He sat beside me, holding my hand. "Do you want me to call Aaliyah?" "Not yet," I said. "Let's just sit a while." The wind moved through the leaves, carrying the scent of roses and earth. I could almost hear Ruth's laughter in the distance, Aaliyah's voice calling her in for supper, and Ruth's voice, my Ruth, humming an old tune in the back of my mind. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely more than a breath, "promise me one thing. Anything. Keep the house. Keep it in the family. Let the garden live. It's where everything started and where everything healed." He squeezed my hand. "I promise." I closed my eyes then, not out of weariness, but peace. The air smelled of roses and home, and the last sound I heard was Marcus's quiet whisper, "I love you, Dad." They say time softens everything, and maybe that's true. After I was gone, Marcus kept his promise. He and Aaliyah tended the garden together, teaching little Ruth how to prune, how to nurture. Every spring, the roses bloomed wild and full, spilling over the fence as if they couldn't contain their joy. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right through the branches, it carried with it the faintest echo of laughter. A man, a woman, and a family that learned, through pain and forgiveness, that love, when tended, never really dies. In the end, that was the story. Not of loss, but of renewal. Not of what was taken, but of what was given back. And in that quiet garden, beneath the roses that had outlasted us all, peace kept blooming, year after year, petal by petal, as steadfast as memory and as eternal as love.